Introduction. Something is fighting people right in front of me. I see a battlefield. It looks like a horrible picture. There are corpses everywhere, and a man with a sword. There is a man with a sword. Monsters are flying at this man. He can be called the Emperor of Swords. He can call himself the Emperor of Swords, but he says his glory ends today. His glory will end today. Has gathered up the bombs in his hands, and the bombs are already in his hand, and he is about to kill the lying hero with his sword. The hero is not discouraged at all, because he has already killed his. He is not discouraged at all, because he has already achieved the goal he set before him. He has already achieved the goal he set before the battle. However, he regrets that he let his guard down. He regrets the offer and was already prepared to die. He was ready to accept death, is already on his way to the hero. Facing the surrendered hero, an explosion occurs. The monster rejoices, encouraging himself. He says that he put in more effort than necessary. However, there is one thing that something interrupts his jubilation. Another man appears before the defeated Emperor of Swords. The Emperor of Swords. The defeated master. I call him Waker. The young man also he apologizes for his tardiness, intending to fight. He apologizes for his tardiness and gets ready to fight. He flashes a fiery light. At that moment, the young man makes one mighty leap. He jumps up and begins to fight the monster. The monster is confused. It does not even know who is standing before it. So Young calls himself the Moon Swordsman. He called himself the Moon Swordsman and said, I will destroy it. He said, I will destroy the Young concentrated and used his technique. He uses a technique to strike down fairies. He begins to strike the fairies with countless blows. Dragons began to appear around the fairy. Dragons began to appear around the fairy and began to hurt the fairy. They hurt fairy and she cried out in pain. Defeated, the master sat down on the floor. That day, heaven unleashed the 9 threads. For that day, heaven unleashed the 9 threads of sword chi. On that day, heaven unleashed the energy of the 9 swords, and the events of 6 years ago at a place like the Balian Manor. I see a little boy being abused by a woman. The woman abuses him and yells at him. The boy is abused by the woman and told that you are weak. Did you forget that you have an important customer? Did you forget that we have an important guest today? The boy has long red hair and walks around in very filthy clothes. He walks around in very filthy clothes. In a trembling voice, he says he remembers his guest. He says he remembers the guests. He keeps yelling at you. He didn't like that I ignored him. The red-headed boy didn't clean up the yard. He didn't tidy up the yard and didn't check for fallen leaves. The boy tried again to tell her that was not true, but the woman said it wasn't true. The lady did not believe him and came closer and to him and approached him, looking like a noble woman, and told the boy, you are not a mother, so why don't you just listen to what she says? She was not his mother. She begins to ask the boy questions. She asks a lot of questions and reminds the boy that his mother abandoned him when he was born. His father didn't leave his room for 6 years. For 6 years the boy refused to answer questions. But the woman hated the boy again. The boy hated her again, and she decided to punish him. Behind the house, she could see 3 children in the immediate vicinity. 3 children in the immediate vicinity. They are watching this situation. I can tell by the color of their hair that they are also from this house. He points to his poor little brother and says, he is like a turtle. He is so frightened that he cannot even look his stepmother in the eye. He can't even look his stepmother in the eye. I see a caravan driving by. We are discussing the fact that it has been 6 years since this event. It's been 6 years since this event. This place has not changed at all. Some people are surprised. He's already arrived and he can't wait to get there. I can't wait to meet my uncle, my only brother-in-law. He tells me to prepare for he tells us to get ready. At that moment, we thought to ourselves the injured husband at the beginning of the story. Sitting in the carriage. Perhaps he is sitting with his wife. But if you listen to their conversation, if you listen to that conversation, you will see that they are in the carriage. They are not the only ones in the carriage. There is a Samian in the carriage. The carriage was steaming hot, so she climbed into the carriage. I climbed into the carriage. A woman, she shouted at him to come down to the roof because it was very dangerous. The master jokingly shouted at her, and she jokingly says, I'm not going to go up there. The master jokingly says that this is not the first time something like this has happened and that with her level of martial arts, the master jokingly says, this is not the first time something like this has happened, and with her level of martial arts, she won't get hurt if she falls. Master jokingly says, it's not the first time something like this has happened, and with her level of martial arts, she won't get hurt even if she falls. There is no need to worry. Another person who was sitting in the room with the elders said to the master, "Please teach me more about young uncles. Please tell me more about your young uncle," he asked the master. "Is it true that he is so strong that even the sword emperor recognizes him? I heard that the sword emperor also recognizes his strength." Yes, 6 years ago, he was very strong in martial arts. His martial arts were very strong. No one could beat him back then. If it were not for Yale, he would not be here now. So at the end he said this: "The technique called the Sword of the Nine Heavens is comparable to the latest technique of the Nango clan." He said that it was comparable to the latest technique of the Nango clan. The young man asked, "If it is so powerful, why not bring it to the world?" My father replied, "When it arrives, don't ask unnecessary questions." He was told not to ask any unnecessary questions. Young had 2 wives, but he loved his second wife more. But she died after giving birth to him. He said that he died after giving birth to the first. I locked myself up in my room. He locked himself in his room because he had lost the meaning of life. My husband wanted to get him out of his room, so once again, he reminds his son not to mention his second wife. He told me not to mention his second wife. Here we go again. Jan's first wife received the news that her husband had left the room. When Jan heard this news, he was tremendously furious. Because no matter how much he tried to persuade her, she would not leave the room. Because he did not want to leave his room. However, as soon as he heard about his brother, he immediately came out. He came out at once. How could he just sit in his room for 6 years and not care? Locked in his room for 6 years and never cared about his children. I can't believe I've been locked in my room for 6 years, not caring about my children. I took a handkerchief and wiped my hands. It was blood on her hand. After hitting the boy, she thought this in her head. And said, "I'm going to see my father for the first time in my life." The boy is going to meet his father for the first time in his life. She said, "Don't show that kind of face in front of the guests." The boy understands the essence of this. The boy, understanding his true nature, says, "I won't see anyone." At that moment, his stepmother praised him. The stepmother praised him for understanding how to be in the house and asked him, "Do you know where to go when you get tired of it?" She asked him if he knew where to go. If you don't want to be a disgrace to the family, you shouldn't show your face to others. Do not let others see your face. Don't pretend you don't see it. But he said you should know what happens. He wants you to know what will happen. The boy begrudgingly replies, "I will reflect on it. I will be sorry," he replied. The stepmother rushed to the children saying that they are most beautiful. "Are you ready to meet your uncle or not?" At the same time, the boy asked her if she was. Meanwhile, the boy sadly tries to leave. One of the children named Beck turns to look at the boy, but he is distracted by his mother telling him that he is a treasure. The mother tells him, I have a very important task for you today. Meet your uncle's daughter and be nice to her." He asks her seriously, "If you understand my mother, you will look her in the eye. Look into my mother's eyes and say." Understand what the mother is trying to say. This means that the young man left the gates of the mansion and met his brother. The brother regrets very much that he had not been looking for him all along. And that he had met him like this. The brother regrets very much that he did not look for him all along and that he met his brother in this way. They have a conversation. 2 brothers who have not seen each other for a long time converse with each other. 2 brothers who have not seen each other for a long time have a conversation, the end of which Young introduces his wife and son to Young. He introduces his son to his wife. Young, who has a beard and has not seen him in 6 years, is completely emaciated after 6 years. Chewing now thinks that he never imagined he would look like this. He means he never imagined looking like this. Even after being in the same room for 6 years. Chewing's mother has been there for 6 years, too. She introduced herself and said, I am very happy. I want to introduce my second child to you. When I look at where my daughter is supposed to be, there is to see that no one is there. The parents feel embarrassed and the master can see that, but he explains that he is often gone for no reason. At that moment, the wife appears behind Master Yang. She tells him that it is okay because his daughter is at a playful age. It's okay because she's at a playful age. And our 4th child loves to play hide and seek. So my wife asked Yang, shall I introduce these children to our guests? Shall I introduce them to our clients? But as far as Yang is concerned, he doesn't seem to like them very much. But when he says, I would like to introduce them to you. He said he wanted to introduce his wife, but his wife introduced herself. His wife introduced herself. Her name is Beak. He said that we would all be tired from the long trip. He invited everyone into the house, as they would all be tired from the long trip. She invited everyone into the house. The mother was behind everyone and turned to her son. She whispered to her son, "Find Nan Gongyin's daughter." It must have made an impression on him. These words were said with a sly smile, as though they would grab the young man's attention. As if, I am sure, the young man would. He said this with a smirk, as if he was sure that the young man would be blown away with kindness from this action. Then we could see the poor little red-haired boy. Again, the red-haired boy was sitting far, far away from the audience. He was sitting so far away from the audience that we didn't know when he would leave the auditorium. He was sitting so far away that he didn't know when he would leave. He was not just sitting there, but perhaps he was probably in a pose that is often punished. This pose makes my hands hurt. My hands hurt, but I had no choice. I was hungry, but I couldn't help it. My eyes really hurt, but fatigue took over. I didn't want to collapse at the end, but fatigue took over. I didn't want to collapse until the end. Because if I fell down, I would be punished by my stepmother. Because if I fell down, I would be punished by my stepmother. And my stepmother knew everything first. I heard the sound of a man approaching. I immediately paused. I noticed someone standing right in front of me. I assumed it was his mother. I immediately started apologizing and blaming myself. But when he looked up, suddenly he noticed a young girl who had captivated him with her beauty. That beauty was the young girl who had escaped. She was the very beauty that had escaped. Moved to one of the manor's buildings. They are moved to one of the manor buildings. Someone is shouting about an engagement with the Nangong clan. You hear someone yelling about an engagement with the Nangong clan. You ask, are you serious? My master replies, no one is related to the clan like Garyu. Miju replied, I am not. This is wonderful news for their children. Miju replied that this is wonderful news for their children and will be of great benefit to all. Young's brother, what do you think? Asked, I think it's a great idea. Said, it's a great idea, but I don't want to be involved in the children's affairs. I don't want to be involved in the children's lives. I don't want to be involved in my children's lives and let them make their own decisions. But his brother has an answer for that. His brother replied, that's the point. The only person in the room who could not support the idea could support the idea, but was unable to demonstrate it. Mejo probably did not like the fact that they could not, by any means, be married. They probably did not like the fact that they could not marry each other's children. He probably did not like the fact that he could not marry his ex-wife. The fact that you loved your ex-wife. She could not accept the fact that he loved his ex-wife. She had worked much harder than her younger self for the last 6 years. For the past 6 years, Young had worked much harder than she had. She came up with a plan and told Young's brother. What would happen if two kids fell in love with each other? What would happen if two children liked each other? As a result, he replied, we would see each other more often and bring our children closer together. They would be much closer than they are now. Bae Miju asked for a favor that Young's brother promised to do for him. Young's brother promised me a favor. Ask the clan for a favor. I want my son to mentor Nubik. He spoke confidently, but there was something sinister in his. There was an aura about him. I could only think he was joking. I couldn't understand why the clan needed to give knowledge to anyone in the clan. Because I could not understand why the clan needed to give knowledge to anyone in the clan. If they had incredible knowledge, but the brother himself would want to ask for help. Or rather, I would like to ask for help. The elder brother was a little puzzled and asked, is it normal for the eldest son not to have inherited the art of swordsmanship? Is it normal for the eldest son not to have inherited the art of swordsmanship? He has inherited the sword of the 9 heavens. Since its techniques are not that complicated, I think he has mastered the. I think he has. But the family's martial arts are very complex. It is complicated. I cannot teach you this technique now. I will tell you why later when we are alone. But that moment was interrupted by Yang and everyone rushes to the scene. Worried about Yang, and everyone begins to call for a doctor in a hurry, and he rushes to call a doctor, but Yang's eldest son found himself out in the backyard looking for Yam in the backyard. He was looking for Yam. He asks, is it true that you killed your nemesis? I ask her where she learned about that. I read about it in a novel. He replied that he read it in a novel. His nickname is Azure Cloud. He kills all enemies who cross his path. The boy may have that nickname, but instead of killing his enemies, he runs up to them. Apologize for his sister's creation of the robot. The other one. He replies that it's no big deal. You ask for the red-haired man's name. At this point, the boy introduces himself, but his sister interrupts him, telling him not to forget his own name. He tells her not to forget his own name. His sister says her name is Saruho. Then it gets better. A good fight between brother and sister started. Brother and sister argue about many things. Brother is always picking on her, bullying her. Soldier attached to a stranger. He sticks to strangers and asks them how many people they have killed already. He asks how many people they have killed. The boy sees this and thinks how nice it would be if his sister was like that. How nice it would be if his sister were so talkative. He wished he had a sister who was talkative and jovial. The boy watched them the whole time, and they apologize, but Mbek also asked, "Do you know where my sister is? Do you know where my sister is? I want to be friends with my sister." I don't know the answer to that question. He's looking for her too. So I say let's look for her together. I suggested we look for her together. I asked him. The boy was a little shyly answered, says his heart is a little bad but he hopes the two of them will become friends. I'm hoping that in time they will become friends. We are transported to a very strange situation happened between a boy and a young man because the boy does not understand who he is. The boy does not understand who he is. He does not know who is standing in front of him. Then he remembers what his mother said. This girl has elegant clothes and accessories. She has elegant clothes and accessories. Standing in front of him is a very important person. He decides that she is standing right in front of him. I remembered that her mother had told her not to meet the guests. He recalled that he was told not to meet the guests. What should he do in such a case? His mother would surely punish him, so he got up from his knees and hurried away from the girl. He ran away from this girl, but this escape did not last long. This escape did not last long, because this girl immediately rushed at the boy to stop him. She grabbed the boy by the neck and threw him to the ground. She grabbed the boy by the neck and threw him to the ground. He asked for forgiveness. Why does he always ask for forgiveness? He would ask for forgiveness. He didn't even react. Even though I pulled the had he never learned martial arts. All the bruises on the boy's body were not the result of martial arts. Maybe he never learned martial arts. The bruises on the boy's body are not the result of martial arts. I noticed that he is not being given enough food. One look at his hair reveals that he is a child. We know that he is the son of a moon-destroying swordsman. But then why is he afraid of everything? She approached him and saw his figure, sat down a little in front of him. But the boy immediately began apologizing again. The boy began to apologize again, and the young man began to reach out his hand. He began to reach out to the boy. I began to feel a tremendously strong sense of fear, imagining that his stepmother had hurt him. As the girl imagined the wounds her stepmother had inflicted on her, the boy imagined the wounds inflicted by his stepmother. The boy realized that he had never received proper care. I realized that I had not. She hesitated, but the young woman reached for it, through the hole and reached out with a chuckling hand. She gave the hand in hers. But Shaker realized that they were not only outside the mansion. Not just outside the mansion. He realizes that they are not just outside the mansion, but in the street where there are many people. When he looks around, he sees that there are a lot of people there. You smell cooking over a bonfire. I discover that I'm not sure what I'm supposed to do. Jackie gets hers and immediately jumps on it. She immediately jumps on it. He takes a bite. The young man looks at him tenderly as he gazes at him gently and continues to stroke his head. The main character is still stroking the at that moment. A man interrupts them. The man stands in their way and looks at them with not so kind eyes. But they are still holding hands. The young man is not worried because they are still holding hands. He does not seem to be worried. This is because there is not the slightest doubt on her face. When we go to the mansion, Young wakes up and apologizes for fainting and annoying his brother. He apologizes for fainting. To the Moon Destroyer, the swordsman. I never thought a swordsman could be in such a state. He says he is shocked. He says he is really embarrassed. But my brother is such a brother. Embarrassed to the point of fainting, but my brother soothed him by saying, "Don't be silly. Don't be silly, the point is you must concentrate on getting well as soon as possible. You must get well as soon as possible, not only for your own sake, but also for the sake of the clan. Not only for yourself, but also for your clan." The young man then began to speak as follows. His brother that the advanced technology of his clan was began to talk about what he remembered. However, he went on to say that I don't feel a connection anymore. I think the goddess is disappointed that he has become so. I think the goddess is disappointed that he has become weak. I think the goddess is disappointed that he has become weak. His second wife, Jung Gayong, has died. She died leaving behind a young-looking child. But he cannot see the child. He cannot see that child. Even though he knows that the child had nothing to do with his wife's death. Even though he knows the child is not responsible for his wife's death. Even though he knows the child is not responsible for his wife's death. Again, he calls himself a wretched man. His brother asked him to stop. He asked him to stop. The brother asked him to stop because he is not used to seeing him so weak. The brother asks him to take care of his own children. The brother tells him not to say such a thing, but the young man further said, I am not used to seeing him so weak. He has grown up without his father's supervision. So this is my first and last request. So, in the end, the older brother he had no choice but to comply. In the evening, the two mothers were waiting for him. Suddenly, two guards rushed into the courtyard and said, We found the young mother. They found the young woman's mother. I immediately ran up to her and asked her if she was okay. She asked if she was hurt, but then she realized that Young was holding the hand of one of the boys. She noticed that he was holding the who, and asked him who he was. At that moment, Chork's stepmother immediately ran over to Chork and asked him if he was okay. He asked her if she was okay. I was very concerned because he came to me in such a state. At that moment, the stepmother turned to Young and she said she was really worried. I hadn't seen him all day, so I was really worried. And she says thank you for finding me. But Young's anger is very strong. At that moment, the stepmother was shocked. At that moment, the other friends who were looking for Young, the men who were looking for Young when he passed through the gate, the brother immediately asked, Where have you been? He wondered if he had gone up on the roof again. He thought he had gone on the roof again, but his brother noticed that he was holding the boy's hand. When the young man turned around, he blushed because he saw something incredibly beautiful. But the look didn't last long, because Young quickly turned around. Muvik noticed that she was holding her brother's hand. Because I noticed that she was holding my brother's hand. Someone suggested that they go inside. The kids would be tired. Then Mama Young said let's go inside. I pulled them apart. When they were about to go inside, the stepmother strangled them. Said, I'll follow you, but our kids already knew that it would not end so easily. Because his stepmother held him tightly with both hands, he immediately began to say, I warned you, she said, not to let him see anyone in the family. I warned you not to let anyone in the family see him. That his stepmother was not his real mother. She wanted everyone to know that she was just a stepmother. But the stepmother, she is staring at this little girl. We also know the following about her. In the 7th month of that year, Young Charn, the great swordsman, fell asleep while he slept. As soon as he died, Beek called for an alliance of clans. Therefore, warriors from other clans answered the call. As a result, the warriors from other clans became known as the White Tiger Squadron. They became known as the White Tiger Squadron of Villerwallian. When Nebek was assigned to study with his uncle, Marie Antoinette Mbek was to be under the tutelage of his uncle. Mbek became an official lord and she was very happy. Here is Mbek going through her cupboards. Mubik's clan came into her room to look for something. Mubik's clan came into her room and said they didn't find anything. That Yoon did not leave any special martial arts manuals behind. It turns out that Yoon didn't leave behind any special martial arts manuals. That's when Nubek throws everything at him. She doesn't understand. Because that woman said something about advanced techniques, so Mbek ordered all those books to be taken to the warehouse. He ordered them to be taken to the warehouse. The purpose was not to remind her of Yon's presence. The servant bowed at her feet and told her immediately, instruct them to assemble in front of the warehouse. But she also told them to lock up the brats and the books. She also asks them if they all understand. So he goes to Shaker and throws the books to the floor and started throwing them on the floor, but he didn't understand anything and he says he was wrong and asks to be released, but he apologizes and asks to be released, but no one listens and he was put in a new room with a book and a book. They put him in a new room and locked him up with his books. They put him in a new room and locked him up with a book. They told him, we are doing this to survive. They told him, we are doing this to survive, there is nothing wrong with you. They told him that they would ask for help, but they do nothing. Nevertheless, they are smiling. At least his father's things will stay with him. Things will remain in his possession, so he can tell the boy that he is made to believe that this is his way of remembering his father. And so the protagonist is locked up and very scared. How long do I have to stay here? How long will I have to think about this? The boy falls asleep and wakes up. He woke up and through a small hole. He is given a breakfast consisting of water and solid food. It was water and solid food. He asks himself if he can eat it, but he can't stand the hunger. Unable to bear the hunger, the protagonist stuffs himself with the food. He eats and eats and eats, but it tastes bad. But suddenly, the protagonist realizes. He notices something glowing in the book. Is glowing, and he realizes that it's not the book. It is okay because it is bright outside. He understands that this is the case, and he is not afraid to check and tilt one of them. I saw a mirror. I saw a mirror with a green rim. There was a lot of dust on it, so I couldn't see anything. There was a lot of dust on it, so I decided to clean it. I looked at myself and asked if I was lonely. I asked him, but to my surprise, he was in the mirror. The reflection of himself in the mirror was smiling. The hero became very scared and started to cry. He asked for help, but no one would listen to him. But no one would listen to his voice. That was that. Before you know it, autumn has arrived. I know that winter is approaching. You can tell that winter is approaching. And the guards wondered if the boy could survive in such a harsh climate. Whether the boy could survive in such a harsh climate. And in fact, they were surprised that the boy was still alive. One of the guards said, "He is still alive." He said he was alive because he kept screaming. Tom asked, "Hasn't Tom had enough?" Tom replied, "No, he has had enough. The boy is alive because someone eats food at a time." They replied, "The boy is really has Master John's blood in his veins. You would have frozen long ago." One of the guards said that if he could have endured this way, he'd be dead in no time. Anyway, because they cut off his part and you can see the hero is still sitting in this room. Still sitting in this room. I noticed something strange. His image is running in the mirror. Trying to get his attention, he says. That reflection doesn't get his attention. Nor is he afraid of it. It is not that he is afraid of it. I don't have the strength to do it. I have a feeling I'm going to die from the cold. The reflection picked up a stick and began to make strange movements. It began to move strangely. I thought he was starting to dance. He didn't care. I remember the first time I saw it. When he saw this reflection, he got very scared. But when he realized that it could not come out of the mirror, he calmed down at once. The protagonist is convinced that he acted that way because he wanted to attract, because he wants to get his attention. But then he began to pay attention to the movement of his reflection. That movement was like the movement of a sword. That movement was like the movement of a sword, and somehow that movement became very familiar to him. It was then that he remembered repeating the movements taught in his family. But for some reason, the movement reminds me of someone else. If you learn this technique, you can control your internal energy and generate energy. There are also first steps to mastering this technique. There is a first step to mastering this technique. You can surround yourself with warm air even in winter. It is to surround oneself with warm air even in winter. So, the protagonist went in front of the mirror and also began to repeat this action. At this time, he looked into the eyes of his own image. At this time he looked into the eyes of his own mirror and said at this point, the hero looked into the mirror's eyes and said, "If I could choose, I would not do it. I might freeze to death in a short time. There is nothing else to do, but we should at least try. We can get through this winter if we show that we can get through this winter." I was thinking as I repeated the repeatedly, and then I collapsed and laughed at him. The boy continued his training. While being watched by the reflection at that time, the hero was very happy. He was able to take the first step. This was because when he applied the technique, warm air blows on you, and if you can maintain it for a long time, you will be able to. If I can maintain it for a long time, I can survive this winter. We might be able to survive this winter. Began to attract the boy's attention. I also thought he could learn more powerful techniques, but I thought we would learn more powerful techniques. Jack said, "Right now, just keeping my body warm in the winter is enough. Just warming up in the winter is enough, so I don't need to learn anything new. I don't need to learn anything new." The boy dropped his stick and tried to step away from the mirror. He tried to move away from the mirror, but then he realized that the movements of the person in the mirror were nothing like his own movements, but noticed that the movements of his family were not very similar to those of his own family. Could it be that perhaps this shadow had taught him a technique different from the one taught in his clan? Did I teach him a technique different from the one taught in my clan? But the protagonist wonders. If it is not his family's technique, what is he showing? If it is not the family's technique, what is he showing them? Does he think he is interested in martial arts? I really thought he was going to repeat that, but the reflection answered in its own way. His face contorted, as if he was making fun of the hero. His face contorted as if he was teasing the protagonist. The hero picked up his sword and challenged. The spring of reflection came, but the hero continued his grueling training. Only this time, the movements of the technique much more difficult than before. However, the reflection still ridiculed and encouraged him to practice more. But even though the protagonist wanted to learn the technique, however, the protagonist wants to learn the technique, but does not know how to repeat it. But the protagonist wants to learn the technique, but doesn't know how to repeat it. He sits next to the mirror and complains. I sat down next to the mirror and said, I have no idea how to do this. He also says that this training has made him hungry. He says that this training made him hungry. He says this training made him hungry. But I like this reflector movement. And it makes me feel sick. I felt sick, so the protagonist analyzed this. All the movements that the reflector did were analyzed to be similar. But still, it is not easy. It is more likely that this martial art is more advanced. The martial art is likely to be more advanced than the one his brother learned. However, this martial art is more likely to be more advanced than the one his brother had learned. This martial art is likely more advanced than the one his brother had learned. It is also clear that it is related to the. It is obvious that it has something to do with the family's art, but how could it? Can we know? I asked. Because the protagonist is missing something from the scenery. The protagonist is repeating all the movements exactly, but he is always missing something. This can be seen from the face of the reflection. So, the protagonist covers the mirror with a cloth, covers it with the cloth and says, I don't learn anymore. But to his surprise, the cloth does not completely cover the mirror. If you look at the bottom of the mirror, the part that is not covered by the cloth, the protagonist asks, do you want me to tell you? I ask, and the mirror nods, and the protagonist tells him not to lie anymore, so he points to it. The protagonist points to something with his finger and letters appear on the mirror. The letters appeared on the mirror and a very interesting inscription was created. So the symbols began to appear before our son. It became clear to our son that this was not just a mirror. An extraordinary mirror. However, even without understanding the deeper meaning of the symbol, the protagonist felt the meaning of the words enter directly into his mind. These words entered directly into his mind. At that moment, he was the art he was trying to reproduce. He knew that it was the sword of the 9 heavens. He began to understand that the life in the clan had been full of ridicule and mockery for as long ever since he could remember. His life had been full of ridicule and mockery. Ever since he could remember, his life had been full of suffering. It was a life full of suffering, and he was destined to die locked in that warehouse. He was destined to die locked in that warehouse. That is what led him to this encounter with the mirror of Ganymede. It was this encounter with the mirror of Ganymede when he began to understand himself, who everyone thought was dead. The self that everyone thought was dead. The same swordsmanship. The 9-10 swordsmanship lost by the death of his father, but little by little, the 9 heavenly sword techniques lost by the death of his father, slowly but surely, he acquired new techniques. Slowly but surely, it was gaining a new owner. We must not forget, however, that it is up to the individual to decide what he or she wants to do with his or her own destiny. But one must remember that what one does with one's destiny and what one does with one's time is up to the individual. His time was indeed an irony. This is because the warehouse gave a bit of meaning to our lives. This warehouse gave a little meaning to the protagonist's existence because this warehouse gave a little meaning to the protagonist's existence and also provided a great place to focus on learning and technology. Focus on learning and skills with the 9 swords of the 9 heavens. It became a great place to learn the 9 swords of the 9 heavens. As a result, time passed rapidly, and the training continued, and the main character wasted no time. He didn't waste any time, he liked it very much, and he continued to practice every day, year after year, year after year, day after day, year after year, he continued his practice. 10 years passed, and the hero became an adult. When I look at the grown-up hero, he seems happy. For the first time after 10 years, he is happy because he can now reproduce all the movements of his reflection. With the city of Luoyang, in the city of Luoyang, a carriage stops. A man gets out of it and asks himself, has 10 years already passed? Because that time has passed in the blink of an eye. The new lord of the clan rushed out to the boy and asked, what's wrong with you? He calls out to this boy, Mbek. Mbek, and you can see that he is calling him Mbek. Mbek has returned from training. His mother is very happy to see Mbek. She says he has become very brave. His mother misses him. The other children in the new chapter children come to see their brother. Rushes over to him and says, my brother is the best. And that he has become brave. He's going to be the best in Luoyang. You're going to be the best in Luoyang. Mother looked at Mbek's back and saw that there were guests from the southern barbarians. I am sorry that I have not seen my son for a long time. She looks at Chin and says, he has grown strong. I tell them that Chin has become stronger. In 10 years he has really become incredibly strong. There is no one in Jung who doesn't know Cloud's name. There is no one who doesn't know Cloud's name. She also realizes that not only is Jiang here, but also his sister. Not only Jiang, but also his sister. She also said this, that he made the other girls look like dried flowers. And Mubik's mother was invited the guests to her house to recover from their long journey to relieve them of the fatigue of their long journey. Mubik's mother invites the invited guests to her house to relieve the fatigue of the long journey and to let them know that their father is safe. Mubik's mother, however, wants to know if his father is safe, but Mubik's mother is not interested. Mubik's mother asks if he is looking around. Is she looking for someone who is she looking for? Does not seem to want to hear that and asks her to go into the house as soon as possible. She tells them to get inside the house as soon as possible. While everyone is going through, the mistress signals to one of the guards to give everyone an order that no one should let this girl to the ban. These two should not meet. She can't understand how she can be so tough that even in 10 years she won't forget that sigh, but then the guard delivers the not so good news that he wanted to tell her. He says that yesterday when he went to the warehouse yesterday, he saw that our protagonist wasn't there. The landlady couldn't believe her ears. There was a lust for murder in her eyes. She even got to the point where she grabbed the security guard by the throat, as if she had started an interrogation on the street. The day before, we saw that our main protagonist, through his training, was still able to repeat certain movements. He shouted with joy, saying what a difficult movement it was. He looked at his reflection, which was also cheering and clapping his hands, letting him know that the movement was indeed perfect. In the pores of joy, our hero began to tell us how he did it. He said, simply because he understood a few of the symbols from the mirror, he was able to figure out what he lacked in order to move forward. He immediately asked to be taught the next step, but the reflection was pointing upwards. Our hero looks up and notices a hole in the ceiling. He sees the sun. Our hero even stopped talking and started jumping on crates to get as close as possible to the sun, because its view of the sky, which he forgotten while he was living here, that the view was really beautiful. Our hero feels the gentle embrace of the sun, which slightly warms the boy's body, wonders how warm it is and if he can go outside. Then he climbs up on the roof of the barn and sees before him an incredible view that amazes him. He looks at the mirror and asks him to go up and look at it with him, but he sees that the place where the reflection was is now empty. Now it's a regular mirror. Our hero is upset. He wanted to share this with someone, but we realize that the work of the mirror at this moment, or more precisely, the work of the goddess. The action then shifts again to the day when the new mistress is informed of all information. She bursts into the barn and notices that no one is there. Then she looks up at the ceiling and not understanding where it came from. Maybe it was lightning, but even so, how could it have hit the ceiling? The guards see that their mistress is very concerned that this might play against. They offer to send her a detachment to find him, but she refuses because why would she waste her energies on a boy who has abandoned his clan that nurtured him? But at this point the evil woman thinks that there is nothing he can do, even after he escaped, because he is an ordinary 6-year-old child in an adult body. He doesn't even know how to make a living and survive. He is about to die of hunger and alone from starvation. But we notice that our hero walks joyfully down the street in a city where many people are looking at him, but he doesn't care. Because life is beautiful. He's out on the street for the first time in 10. Then we see Mubik's mother is talking about our hero, asking if it's true. Is it true that he ran away 3 days ago? The mother lies and says that she sent many people to look for him, but they never couldn't find him. His brother says that a man like his brother couldn't run away, but his mom keeps lying, saying that he was worried that his older brother, who had done better in school, are scheduled to arrive, and generally no one knew what had happened. No one could know what happened to the protagonist. Nuvek asked if it was true. Is it true that the same girl entered them? Beck asks her why she does not have lunch, but she looks at her mother. When Beck asks her why she doesn't have lunch, Beck looks at her mother. The old woman tries to get out of the situation. The old woman asks, "Didn't you come here?" Because she is worried about the protagonist. But the old woman convinces him that she did not come because she is worried about the protagonist. But the old woman convinces him that the protagonist is at an age when children are running away from home. But she disagrees, because she has seen that there is not a speck of dust in the house. Not a speck of dust in the rooms. Not a speck of dust in this room, despite the fact that she left 3 days ago. Not a single other part of this room has been monitored. This is because she has noticed a spider web in the corner of the room. She concluded that there was not a single sign of human presence in this room. She concluded that there was not a single sign of a person in this room. Madam again tries to convince everyone that they were desperately searching for the person they were looking for. But John simply turns his back on her. She quickly leaves, and Nubik yells at her to go after her. But she runs off at a brisk pace. The old woman is furious and asks Son, if she is always like this, how could you treat her like this? But Nubik asks his mother, is it true? Is it true that my brother ran away from home? Or did something really happen? The mother says it is all right, and the son is silent. But the son is silent. John doesn't always reveal his true nature. He always needs a reason. They call him the flower telepath. He says he has a pretty face like a flower and can read people's thoughts. She says she can read thoughts. She never gives up. She says that she never gives up on even ghosts can be fooled, she says, but not her. If she is bleeding, it is for a reason. The mother is furious and asks her son if he thinks he can kill her. She asks her son. Of course, he says no, of course not, the mother says. But I'll do what you say when I feel like it. Because if it had worked, Jan would not have left, and the mother would have left the room quickly. Yes, he did not live in this room but he did run away. He asked his mother where his brother lived, if not here. But my mother kept exaggerating saying she had never seen my father, so his mother made him admire his own. Nubik didn't understand at first, but he went straight to the barn, and when he arrived at the barn, there was John. When he arrived at the barn, John was there. I don't know why I thought she was there. That's when John told me. It's the most secluded place. Lots of guards. But when she realized when she saw the place, why they were trying to hide it. A musty, filthy warehouse and worn-out children's clothes. Worn-out children's clothes, bedding, and I had to curl my head up and go to bed. I had to curl my head up and go to sleep. If anyone had told her about it, she would have thought she was hiding the devil. But she turned her back on her new back, said she would tell my father. Since he was my father's apprentice, would not leak the rumor to the outside world. But she knew that the relationship between the two families would remain the same. She returned home with her brother and she would return home with her brother. I am wondering how things could go so wrong so quickly in this barn. I wonder how things can go so wrong so quickly. Warlayong and Namgung's families were to be united. The family unity is in jeopardy. Back to the main character. Back to the protagonist still walking around town. He is looking at the I am amazed at how much has changed. He must have been sitting in that warehouse. Everything has changed. Has changed. I try to find a way out. I think about running away to the mountains. Let's run away to the mountains. And so, when the hero was flying in the sky in the clouds, he bumped into a man. His shoulders bumped into him, and he immediately apologized. But he replied rudely as usual. I looked at the man's face and recognized him as the guard who let himself in. I knew it was the guard who let himself into the barn. I apologized again and quickly stepped forward. But the inspector stopped him and stopped me and said, "We have met somewhere before." He told me that I had already met him somewhere to check, and the protagonist panicked. He didn't know what to do and the guard kept yelling at him, but the protagonist did not want to enter that chat, so he had to run away. Shout, but all the protagonist cares about now is finding the gate. All he cares about now is finding the gate to the outside, and not to be caught. He was definitely happy because he could see the gate, but he is still being chased. The guards are yelling at him. If they catch up with him, the boy will die. If they catch up with him, the boy will die. The hero realizes that he is very fast. He will be able to catch up with him soon enough. But if they catch up, he will be sent back to his mother. He would be sent back to his mother. He would keep running, calling the hero a sucker, but the hero has no intention of surrendering. He's running toward the gate, which is already closing. He is running toward the gate. He was on the verge of running into the gate, believing he could slip through. A guard appears behind the hero and tells him, "I didn't pay attention to him. I didn't pay attention to him. If you are trying to escape, you have nothing to worry about." The hero, however, decides to speed up at the last moment so that he can't escape. He decided to speed up at the last moment to avoid being caught. He was caught at the last moment. The guardian realizes that the gate above him is about to crush him. The protagonist realizes that he is about to be crushed by stops the gate with one hand and asks the guardian, "Are you okay? Are you all right?" He asks, "I'm fine. I didn't want to get caught." But the guard was frightened by the boy's strength. Scared by the boy's strength, he backed away. "I just followed him, I didn't do anything." The hero smiles, not knowing what to expect. Then he tells the guard, it was no use worrying. He tells him to go his own way. He lets go of his hand and the gate immediately falls to the ground and fell to the ground, and there was a very loud noise. The guard looks behind him and sees a loud noise. Cannot understand. Maybe he is sleeping. According to Jiang, one should not look down on children and one should not look down on women. One should not look down on children or women. It is said in Jiangyu that one should not look down on the main character has not eaten anything. He is very hungry for mushrooms. He thought that if he ate the wrong thing in the mountains, he might be poisoned. I thought if I ate the wrong thing in the mountains, I might be poisoned. When I couldn't eat anything, I picked up some fly grass. He picks up the flycatcher and tries to eat it. His lips are already drooling and this mushroom looked delicious. By evening, the mushroom was already the protagonist feels nauseated, his body ached, and the picture floats before his eyes. It is as if the world is spinning. The protagonist understands I can't see anything. He can't see anything, and it's pitch black all around him. But what would happen if a wild beast appeared? What would happen if a wild beast appeared? The protagonist must find a place to sleep as soon as possible. He has to find a place to sleep, but his eyes are already pretty much closed. He closes his eyes and falls to the ground. I can't sleep in the forest because it's dangerous to sleep in the forest. It is dangerous to sleep in the forest because it is dangerous to sleep in the forest. But you hear two men on the hero's body. There are two men over the hero's body, and he thinks there is a dead body in front of him. They think there is a dead body in front of them. They say they want to take the boy. He says, I'm going to take the boy. But the other one immediately says, why? Why do we need a man who is about to die? But then they thought, why not? Fate determines the fate of the hero. For only by that fate will the hero live or die. Life or death. My brother scolded me. Because he said so only because his brother scolded him. Because he said so because he had been a minister for some time. Because he thought that it would better life. Because he thought it would be a better life. Because he had been a minister for a while. And he thought it would be a better life. I saw two men leaning over me. I didn't know if they were still alive or not. So brother asks the other man what happened to him. And he asked him if he was still breathing. And he said he was still breathing, so we agreed to take him with us. We decided to take him with us. One of my brothers doesn't think that the brat is more horrible than us, but he does not think he is worse than us. He said that he looked like a beggar and they would thank him for saving the protagonist while they were dragging him away. We overheard a little conversation between them while they were dragging we heard their conversation. We heard a conversation that said there are 6 of us in one family. Don't worry, one more mouth won't kill you. We won't die because one more person, the mere old man, was in a state of delirium. I see a bright light in front of me. I saw the goddess in front of me. But the goddess says, I didn't call anyone. When the hero wakes up a man in front of him. How did he fall into the canyon? Had he fallen into the canyon? He could have died. The hero said, thank you very much. I asked him where we were and he told me we were at the 5 Peaks Fortress. He is told that he is at the 5 Peaks Fortress and is informed that they are bandits. Told that they are bandits, the bandits begin to introduce themselves. They introduce themselves. I am Gamun, the second brother. The third is Marhand, and the fourth is Huendo Dao, but P wonders if he remembers the name. He wonders if he remembers the name, their commander. When Panjancho appears, he is quick to say that he is a good friend of the company. He says that he has to pay the full amount of he has probably been there for a long time, so this time he will have to work for it. Why the rush, said Pinko. Even animals respond in kind, he said. Heroes are like animals. And then they'll pay you back in full, won't they? Says one of the brothers. Let's not push a kid who's finally waking up. Give him something to eat. I am sure the hero is hungry. He is a little embarrassed, wondering if he will be able to eat. But then he sees a bunch of he notices that the men come over to him and try to take care of him. The main character says, I'm not hungry, and he waves his hand and says he is not hungry. But his brother tells him again. He tells him to take this meal. Because his stomach had burst while he was sleeping. The hero continues to deny it because he has no money. But the brother says that he only gave him food out of kindness. He is told that he is giving him food out of kindness. One of the brothers looks at him and he doesn't understand why, and says, he is a little child. He is a little kid, but he looks 16 years old. He also says he looks like he's 5 years old. The kid is a little slow, but the other brother, one of the older brothers, says the child is a little slow, But the other brother says, let's give him a job that is not so difficult at the moment. I'll give him a job that is not so difficult. But if he has miscalculated, he will not be able to do this. He will soon starve to death if we don't do this. He will starve to death. This boy is a good boy. But the other one says it is not kindness, but stupidity. He can't even get his own food. And all beggars are used to doing nothing. They are used to doing nothing, so they put their hands down and work. But the captain grabbed the boy with both hands. He grabbed the boy by the neck and took him out into the street. He said that was no good, and took him out into the street. That's no good, he yelled at the boss. If you're going to take him, you've got to put his brains in their place. I shouted. He dragged the boy to the floor. The hero was yelling at him to let him go. He threw the boy out onto the street. But the hero was very afraid. I really don't have anything, but the inspector said he says he won't do anything. Seeing the hero's reaction, the captain realized that someone had been beating him the whole time. Therefore, he tries to hide himself with his hands. He tries to cover himself with his hands. What is he going to do? But why should the hero survive in the tower? I don't understand why I have to survive in the tower. He could not understand, but the captain was very clear. That it was necessary for him to live as a human being, not to be a snack for the beasts. That he needed it to live as a human being, not to be a prey for the beasts. He would not starve to death. To his shame, he had never wanted anyone to take him anywhere before. It was because he had never been he asked how he could become a bandit. But the captain couldn't understand. The captain doesn't understand. He says you must not push away the helping hand. You can't say I'm a wimp. You can't refuse help. Then the captain says there are two kinds of people in this world. There are two kinds of people in this world, those who take and those who give. The givers. What does the hero want to be? The protagonist does not understand anything about what he wants to be. And since he does not understand anything, the captain explains in plain language. What does the hero want to be? Does the hero want to live and keep starving? Live and continue to starve? Does he want to be disrespected and abused? I was like trash, so the protagonist replied. I don't like being called trash and looked down upon. I don't want to be called trash and disrespected. I don't want to be deprived of anything anymore. So I would rather be on the side of the takers. The captain smiled broadly and said, what a hero needs is determination. What I need now is determination, he said, so the captain shows the hero what he has. Starting with the first peak on the left, up to the fifth peak, the fifth up to the fifth is their territory, and they say they are the kings of the 5 peaks. They say they are the kings of the 5 peaks. No one looks at them, but if the hero stays with them, he says that he will be one of the kings of the peaks. I put my hand on the hero's head. That reassured the hero. I laughed. I never thought I would fall in love with this boy, so this man calls him the 7 brothers of the 5 peaks. So what is the hero's name? What is the name of the hero? John Yohar, after hearing the boy's name. The commander has one more thing to tell him. If you want to join us. He stands up. He gets up and starts shouting the phrase, we are the strongest. He began shouting the phrase, we are the strongest, at the top of his voice. I asked the hero to shout the same thing. At that moment, John received a jolt that shook his whole body. This is because his family and his stepmother, who abused him daily, had made life in the warehouse was so cramped, and because of his life in the warehouse, his heart had turned to stone. But the stone cracked, and when the stone cracked and his body was released from the pressure of his body was as if it had been struck by lightning. It was as if he had been struck by lightning. It is the same technique as the sword of the 9 heavens. It is the same jutsu of the sword of the 9 heavens that had been asleep until now. It was a response to the desire to lead a new life. In response to the desire to lead a new life, the hero stood in the same posture as their commander. He stood in the same posture as their commander. Cried out, "I am the one who is in command." The commander, too, realized that he had kept it inside him for too long. This roar spread from all 5 peaks. This scream was like awakening from a long sleep. It was like awakening from a long sleep. And with this scream, the hero opened a new page. He opened a new page. He clapped me on the shoulder for a job well done. His voice was, despite his scrawny body, there was something in that voice. He said, "To waste this kind of spirit in cooking and cleaning is I decided to teach him martial arts. I would teach him martial arts if I had time, but as long as he did nothing while he does nothing, why don't you follow the other brothers?" What if he followed the other brothers? Because the hero is weak since he needs to be strong. Thus began the hero's new life in the mountains. His new life as a bandit began. The first thing the bandit learned was that the basics of survival, but he was very naive because he had spent most of his life in a barn. Because he had spent most of his life in a barn, he was very naive. The team, or rather his new family, accepted him. He also opened up to them because they accepted him, and he quickly adjusted to his new life and began to lead an ordinary life. He began to lead an ordinary life, but as you know, not everything is as it seems. This is because the bandit is from a commoner's background, and the bandits were from commoners and were not strong in martial arts. They were not strong in martial arts, and they went to the mountains and never returned without being injured. However, even so, despite this, he also rejoiced in small victories and many other things. He enjoyed every day. The hero grew up in an aristocratic family, but he never felt the same. He never felt that because he grew up as an unloved child. Ironically, this was the first time I learned what it meant to be happy. I understood what it meant to be a bandit. One day a very important person came to see them. The boss of the Poon came to see them. He was going to find the fortress. But when he saw it, he said, "This is not a fortress, it is a shelter." He said it was not a fortress, but a shelter for stray dogs. He said it was a shelter for stray dogs. Since the bandits named it that to emphasize their profession. They were the subject of jokes for a long time because they gave it that name to emphasize their profession. For a long time they were the subject of jokes, and then one day an incredibly strong man appeared. An incredibly strong man appeared. He called himself the Green Forest Bandit. The rumor spread. When the rumor spread among the people, all the sex magicians and martial artists, when the rumor spread among the people, all the masters of sex and martial arts wanted him, but nothing. However, he was much stronger than those people. On the other hand, his strength and the rumors about him grew bigger and bigger day by day, and people began to call him the Demon Emperor who smashed the. He became known as the top 10 masters in the world. At that time, all the sexes that had long hidden their existence were overjoyed. That such a strong man had emerged. As a result, many masters were able to get the giants to begin to search for him. They began to seek out this master and to want to enter the Green Forest. In the Green Forest, that master was the lord of the demons that shattered the heavens. He had become the leader of the bandits. As a result, the Green Forest became the Green Forest became the most powerful in history. It became the most powerful in the history of Malam. As a result, the Green Forest became the most powerful in Malam's history, and the sect's reputation continued to grow. It came to be spoken of as the unattainable dream of the mountain gangs and other sects. It came to be spoken of as the unattainable dream of the mountain gangs and other sects, so the brothers wanted to go there too. Asked them to accept Batman. Batman, who had been bad-mouthing their fortress, was the deputy chief of the fortress of the mountains, a one-eyed, bloody man named Debwale. He was the deputy chief of the. He approached Punincho and asked him if the Green Forest was playing with him. Is the Green Forest playing with toys? Do you think they are playing with toys, or do you think that a community of no more than 10 people? Do you think a community with no more than 10 people deserves to have power? When I asked him, Brother Pun replied, "If it's a matter of numbers, I would say that there are about 3 people. If it's a matter of numbers, then maybe 3 people. I can gather 3 people in less than a month." At that point, he pointed out that he was being cheeky. He said, because we need 4 people, not 3. Because we need 4 people, not 3. He added that he had a child and didn't feel like part of the team. However, the commander was a little confused. Began to say that the main character is very useful, helpful, doing a good job at home. But John said he needed 10 soldiers. 10 men are enough to fight. Not counting children, that means 6. I told him that there were 6. He wondered if they understood the size of their territory. So he thought he had come here for nothing. But another man came and told him. He told us to meet him in person and make sure everything was all right. They told him that they were the last resort. I told him that we were the last resort. We were only able to adopt 1 fortress. I agreed to make him a family member. They said they would start on day 15. The captain became very happy and ashamed of China.